I stood frozen in front of that half-open door. My heart stopped when I saw my wife, the woman who had been missing for 6 months. She was kneeling on the floor of the ranch, scrubbing the tiles with an old rag. Her hair was dirty, her clothes were tattered, and her eyes. My God. Her eyes did not recognize me when I looked up. I am William Anderson. I am 68 years old. For 40 years, I built a real estate empire in Austin, Texas. 3 ranches, 2 commercial developments, a fortune that I thought I would leave to my children with pride. But at this moment, standing on the threshold of my own family ranch on the outskirts of the hill country, all that wealth meant nothing, because I had just discovered that my son Michael and my daughter-in-law Sarah had turned my wife into their servant, or something worse. The story began 6 months ago. Emily, my wife of 42 years, disappeared one night in April. Michael arrived at my house in the suburbs with a distraught face, saying that Mom had gone out for a walk and never returned. We called the police. We checked hospitals. We put up posters all over the city. Nothing. The first few days were a hell of hope and despair. Every phone call made me jump from the armchair. Every patrol car that passed in front of the house made me tremble. Emily was a woman of routine. She did not go out alone at night. She had no enemies. How could she simply vanish? Michael and Sarah seemed devastated. They came every day to keep me company. Sarah cried on my shoulder. Michael organized the searches with his friends. During those terrible weeks, I thought, at least I have my son. At least I'm not alone in this. How naive I was. The first strange sign came a month after the disappearance. I mentioned that I wanted to go to the family ranch in the hill country, the property where Emily and I spent our weekends, where we raised our children, where we had so many memories. I wanted to feel her close. Walk through the garden she tended, touch the things she touched. Michael went rigid. "That is not a good idea, Dad," he said with a voice that admitted no reply. "That place will only give you memories of Mom." "That is precisely why I want to go," I replied. Sarah intervened with that smile of hers that had always seemed charming to me, but now remembering it makes me nauseous. "Mr. Anderson, Michael is right. Besides, the house is closed up. There is no electricity or water. It would be dangerous for you to go alone in your emotional state." My emotional state. I had just lost my wife, and they were treating me like a child, incapable of making decisions. But I gave in. I was weak. I was broken. And I trusted them. The months passed like a fog of pain. The police closed the active investigation. The private detectives I hired reached dead ends. Emily had become a ghost, an absence that ate away at every corner of my house. Michael and Sarah continued to visit me, but something had changed. Their visits became more spaced out, colder. When I asked about the ranch, if they had gone to check that everything was in order, they changed the subject with disconcerting skill. "Everything is fine, Dad. Do not worry about that. We already sent someone to check. Everything is in order. Concentrate on your health. The ranch does not matter now, but for me, it did matter. That ranch was the last place where Emily and I were happy. It was the land where we planted orange trees together, where we celebrated our silver anniversary, where she told me under the Texas stars that I was the love of her life. 3 weeks ago, something inside me broke, or rather something was put back together. I was in my study reviewing papers when I found an old photograph of Emily at the ranch smiling next to the bougainvillea she loved so much, and in that moment, a certainty went through me like lightning. I had to go. I needed to be there. I needed to feel her close, even if it was just empty walls and dust. I mentioned my plan to Michael that same afternoon. His reaction was violent. "You are not going to that ranch." "Dad," he shouted something he had never done before. Michael was always a respectful, educated son. Seeing him lose control like that left me frozen. "It is my property," I said calmly. "I can go whenever I want." "You are not thinking clearly. Sarah intervened, appearing from the kitchen as if she had been listening. The doctor said you should not drive long distances. Your blood pressure. My blood pressure is perfect, I interrupted her, and I do not need anyone's permission to go to my own house. Michael approached me with an expression I had never seen on him, hard, calculating. Dad, if you go to that ranch, you are going to have problems with me. I'm warning you. Warning me. My own son was threatening me. That night I could not sleep. Michael's words spun around in my head. Why so much mystery with the ranch? What were they hiding? And then, like pieces of a macabre puzzle, I started to remember strange details from the last few months. The time I heard Sarah talking on the phone in a low voice saying, he cannot know anything, he has to keep believing. She disappeared. The looks Michael and Sarah exchanged when I mentioned Emily. The day I found a supermarket receipt in the trash from the town near the ranch. Large purchases for several people just after they told me no one had been to the ranch in months. The occasion when Sarah arrived at my house with red dirt on her shoes. Red dirt like the dirt at the ranch. When I asked her, she went pale and said she had gone to visit a friend in the country. Lies. It was all lies. I made a decision that morning while the clock struck 4 a.m. and the silence of my house drowned me. I was going to the ranch in secret without telling anyone. I spent the next few days planning. Michael and Sarah had the habit of traveling to Dallas on weekends to see her parents. Next Saturday would be my opportunity. When the day arrived, I waited for them to call me from the road to confirm they were on their way. Michael's voice sounded relaxed, unprepared. Dad, we are going to be away all weekend. Will you be okay alone? We can ask the neighbor to check on you. I will be fine, son. I lied with a calm I did not feel. Enjoy the trip. As soon as I hung up, I got moving. The drive to the ranch normally took me 2 hours. That day, with my heart beating in my throat and sweaty hands on the steering wheel, it seemed to last an eternity. Every mile I advanced down the highway increased my anxiety. What did I expect to find? An abandoned and dusty ranch. Evidence that Michael had been using it for something illegal, or absolutely nothing, and all my fears were just the paranoia of an old man who had lost his wife. None of my theories came close to the truth. I arrived at the ranch around 3 in the afternoon. The October sun fell relentlessly on the dry Texas land. The hills rose in the distance, silent witnesses to what I was about to discover. The front gate was padlocked, but I had the key. I had always had it. I drove in slowly along the dirt road, kicking up red dust. And then I saw it. The main house. It was not abandoned. The curtains were open. There were clothes hanging in the side yard. An old car I did not recognize was parked under the mesquite tree. Someone lived there. I parked at a distance and walked toward the house with trembling legs. Every step seemed to echo in the heavy silence of the afternoon. The cicadas sang in the trees. The wind moved the dry leaves. I approached the side window and looked inside. What I saw froze my blood. The living room, our beautiful living room with the furniture Emily had chosen with such care, was transformed. The sofas were covered with dirty sheets. There were boxes stacked against the walls, empty beer bottles on the coffee table. But the worst was seeing the door to the service room half open and hearing voices. I moved closer, my heart beating in my chest like a war drum. A man's voice I did not recognize. A woman's voice responding in a muffled murmur. And then, clear as a bell, in the silent afternoon, I heard something that destroyed me. Hurry up! Old woman, we do not have all day. Michael and Sarah are coming tomorrow, and they want the house spotless. I went around the house to the main entrance. The wooden door, the same one I installed myself 30 years ago, was ajar, as if someone had left in a hurry and forgot to close it completely. I pushed the door with a trembling hand, and that was when the world stopped. In the center of the living room, kneeling on the floor with a rag in her hand, was Emily, my wife, the woman the whole city believed missing, the woman I had mourned for 6 months, the woman whose absence had destroyed my life. She was alive, but when she looked up at me, her eyes were empty, completely empty. There was no recognition. There was no surprise. There was no love. Just nothing. "Emily," I whispered, my voice breaking. She blinked slowly and looked back at the floor, continuing her task of scrubbing the tiles, as if I were invisible, as if I were a ghost in my own house. Behind me, I heard heavy steps. I turned and saw a large man about 40 years old, with a face weathered by the sun and an expression of absolute shock. "What the hell are you doing here?" he said with a hoarse voice. Before I could answer, another figure appeared from the kitchen, an older woman with a dirty apron and a scared face. "Mr. Anderson," she gasped, "you should not be here." And in that moment, while I watched my wife cleaning the floor like an automaton, while those strangers looked at me with panic in their eyes, while the weight of betrayal fell on me like a ton of bricks, I understood everything. My son had not lost his mother. He had hidden her. The large man took a step toward me, but I raised my hand with an authority I did not know I still possessed. "Do not even think about coming closer," I said with a cold voice. "This is my house, my property, and that woman is my wife." The guy stopped confused. He looked at the woman in the apron, then at Emily, who continued cleaning the floor as if none of this were happening. "Mr. Anderson," began the older woman with a trembling voice. "We only. Mr. Michael hired us too?" To what I exploded, feeling 40 years of composure crumble in a second. To keep my wife as a prisoner, to make her work as a servant in her own house. "It is not what it looks like," she stammered, twisting the apron between her hands. "Mr. Michael said the lady was sick, that she needed special care, that you could not know because—" "Because what?" I roared. The silence that followed was deafening. I knelt in front of Emily, taking her face in my hands. Her skin was thinner, paler. She had deep, dark circles, but it was her. It was my Emily. "My love," I whispered. "It is me, William, your husband." Her eyes looked at me without expression, as if she were seeing through me toward something distant and unreachable. "She is not going to answer," said the older woman softly. "She almost never speaks. She only obeys simple orders." "Mr. Michael said that. I do not want to hear what my son said." I interrupted her with tears burning my eyes. "I want to know what you did to her." The woman stepped back. The large man crossed his arms, uncomfortable. "We did not do anything to her," he said finally. "When we arrived 5 months ago, she was already like this. Mr. Michael paid us to take care of her, to keep her clean and fed. He said you could not see her because it would hurt you, that she had had an episode that the doctors recommended keeping her away." Lies. It was all elaborate lies, carefully constructed. I looked at Emily again. There was a small scar on her temple that I did not remember. Her wrists had circular marks, like from ropes, handcuffs. The fury I felt in that moment was something primal, something that came from a deep and dark place I did not know existed inside me. My son had done this, my own son. "Help me get her to the car," I ordered, standing up with determination. "We cannot do that," said the man blocking my path. "Mr. Michael told us that." I took out my phone and dialed a number I had hoped never to have to use. My personal lawyer, Robert Sullivan, the best civil lawyer in Texas and my friend for 30 years. "Robert," I said when he answered, "I need you to come to the ranch immediately and bring the police." "William, what is wrong? I found Emily. She is alive, and my son." My voice broke. I could not say it out loud yet. It was too monstrous. "I am on my way," Robert replied without hesitation. "Do not do anything. Wait for me." But I could not wait. Every second Emily was in that place was one more second of a nightmare. I took her by the arm gently. She let herself be guided without resistance, like a doll. The older woman began to cry. "Please, Mr. Anderson, we have family. We need this job." Mr. Michael threatened us with what I asked, stopping. With reporting us to immigration, she sobbed. "We are undocumented. We do not have papers." He said if anyone asked anything, or if we did not do exactly what he told us, they would deport us, that we would never see our children again. Of course. Michael had chosen his accomplices carefully, vulnerable. People who could not defend themselves. People who had too much to lose. I am not going to report you to anyone, I said calmly, but I need you to tell me everything. When did you bring my wife here? What exactly did Michael tell you? The woman wiped her tears and began to speak with a trembling voice. We arrived at the end of April. Mr. Michael brought us in his truck. The lady came in the back seat, blindfolded and hands tied. He said it was for her safety that she had tried to hurt herself. He showed us papers from a doctor, documents that said she had a severe mental disorder. Lies. Emily had never had mental problems. She was the most sane and balanced person I knew. And what did he ask you to do? That we keep her here, that we feed her 3 times a day, that we bathe her, that we give her pills. What pills? The man went to the kitchen and returned with a bottle of medication. I took it with trembling hands. Diazepam high-dose sedatives. They had been drugging her for 6 months to keep her docile, to erase her personality, to turn her into an empty shell. The hate I felt toward my son in that moment was something tangible, something I could taste in my mouth like rusty metal. Did Michael come often? He and Mrs. Sarah came every 2 weeks, said the woman. They brought supplies, checked that everything was in order. Sometimes they stayed a day or 2. And my wife, how did she behave when they were here? The two exchanged an uncomfortable look. She was afraid of them, admitted the man. When she heard Mr. Michael's car, she started to tremble. She would hide in the service room. Once she tried to run, and Mrs. Sarah grabbed her by the hair and dragged her back. My vision clouded with red. I had to lean against the wall to not fall. Sarah, the daughter-in-law who cried on my shoulder, the woman who brought me homemade food when I was depressed, the one who organized masses for the rest of Emily's soul. She had dragged my wife by the hair like an animal. Why, I whispered, why would they do this? We do not know, said the woman, but we heard conversations. Mrs. Sarah talked a lot on the phone. She said things about properties, about inheritances, about how you were going to change the will soon, and that they needed time. And there was the truth, ugly and brutal. Money. It all came down to money. Michael knew that my current will left 50% of my assets to Emily, and the other 50 divided between him and his sister Jessica. But if Emily disappeared and eventually was declared legally dead, Michael would inherit her share. And if I died before finding her, which they probably expected to happen soon, given my state of emotional devastation, he would keep everything. It was a perfect plan, cruel, monstrous, but perfect, except that I had decided to come to the ranch. Emily remained standing next to me with a lost look. I hugged her, feeling her rigid body against mine. She smelled of cheap soap and confinement. I'm going to get you out of here, I whispered in her ear. I promise you this is going to end. If she heard me, she gave no sign. 40 minutes later, the sound of several cars arriving alerted me. Robert had come with 2 patrol cars from the local police and a doctor. The chaos that followed was a blur. Paramedics checking Emily, police taking statements. Robert recording everything with his phone, documenting every detail. This is kidnapping, said Robert with a grave voice, while watching Emily being examined. False imprisonment, possible attempted fraud. William, your son, is going to go to jail for this. My son. The boy I taught to ride a bicycle. The young man who hugged me crying when he was accepted into college. The man who gave the speech at my 60th birthday, saying I was his hero. That man no longer existed. Maybe he never existed. What do you recommend? I asked, feeling the weight of my 68 years on my shoulders. First, we take Emily to a private hospital. She needs a complete neurological evaluation. Those sedatives may have caused damage. Second, we file a formal complaint against Michael and Sarah. Third, he paused, looking at me with a serious expression. Third, you prepare for war, my friend, because this is going to get ugly. I did not know how ugly until my phone rang 2 hours later. It was Michael. For a moment I considered not answering, but something in me, Maybe the need to confront him, to hear his voice. Knowing what he had done made me slide my finger over the screen. "Hello, son," I said with a neutral voice. "Dad, where are you? I went by your house, and you were not there." I got worried. The lie flowed so naturally from his mouth, as if it were the easiest thing in the world. "I am at St. Joseph's Hospital," I replied, "in Austin." A silence. Then, "Are you okay? Did something happen?" "Yes, something happened. I found your mother." The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear his breathing accelerating on the other end of the line. "What? What did you say that I found Emily?" "She is alive, Michael. But I suppose you already knew that." "Dad, I do not know what. I was at the ranch." I interrupted him, every word coming out like ice. "I saw your mother cleaning the floor like a maid. I spoke with the people you hired to keep her prisoner. I saw the pills you gave her to keep her drugged." "Dad, you have to let me explain." "There is nothing to explain," I said, surprised by the calm in my voice. "The police already have all the information. My lawyer is preparing charges, and as soon as I hang up this phone, I am going to change my will to disinherit you completely." "Dad, wait," he shouted, panic evident now. "You do not understand. Mom was sick. I had to commit her." The doctors said. "The only doctors here are the ones treating your mother for sedative poisoning and malnutrition." I cut him off. "Tell me, Michael, when exactly did you plan to kill her? Or were you going to keep her drugged until she died alone at that ranch?" "I never." I was not going to. 6 months, I said, my voice breaking finally. 6 months I mourned your mother. 6 months I thought she was dead. I hired detectives. I put up posters. I did not sleep. I did not eat. And you came to my house to comfort me, while you had her locked up 2 hours away. "Dad, please do not call me Dad," I said, tears running down my cheeks. "I no longer have a son." I hung up before he could answer. Robert was next to me with his hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing." "Did I?" I asked, looking toward the room where the doctors were attending to Emily. "How am I going to live knowing that my own son—" "It was not your fault," said Robert firmly. "What Michael did has nothing to do with you. Greed. Greed can turn people into monsters." The following days were a bureaucratic and emotional nightmare. The doctors confirmed that Emily had been systematically sedated for months. The neurological damage was significant, but potentially reversible. However, her recent memory was fragmented. She did not remember how she got to the ranch. She did not remember the first months of her captivity. The psychiatrists talked about traumatic dissociation defense mechanisms, how the mind sometimes shuts down to protect itself from horror. The police arrested Michael and Sarah 3 days later. They found them trying to cross the border. The news exploded in the local media. Businessman discovers wife kidnapped by her own son. Journalists camped in front of the hospital. In front of my house, they wanted the full story. Robert handled everything. I just wanted to be next to Emily. I spent the nights in a chair next to her bed, holding her hand. Sometimes her fingers squeezed mine slightly. The doctors said it was a good sign. A week after finding her, I was sitting next to her when she opened her eyes and looked at me. Really looked at me. Not through me. At me. "William," she whispered with a voice hoarse from disuse. I leaned forward, my heart pounding in my chest. "Yes, my love, I am here." Where am I?" "You are safe. You are in the hospital. I found you." Her eyes filled with tears. "Michael." He gave me something to drink. I woke up in a strange room. I could not think. Everything was cloudy. "Shh! Do not talk. Now!" I said, wiping her tears. "You have to recover." "How long?" 6 months. The horror on her face was heartbreaking. 6. And you? I thought you had disappeared. I thought you were dead." She cried then. She cried like I had never seen her cry. And I cried with her, both of us clinging to each other like castaways in a storm. But even in that moment of shared pain, something was brewing inside me. A determination, a thirst for justice. Because Michael had not only hurt his mother, He had hurt us all. He had destroyed a family. He had betrayed the most sacred trust that exists. And although the criminal charges would follow their course, I knew I needed to do more. I needed to make sure Michael and Sarah fully understood what they had lost. 2 weeks later, with Emily showing significant improvement and finally back home under constant medical care, I called a meeting with Robert and my accountant Edward. I want to change everything, I said, spreading the documents of my estate on the desk. The will, the trusts, the properties in Michael's name. Edward whistled low. We are talking about assets worth more than $10 million, William. I know perfectly well. Are you sure about this? Asked Robert. He is your son. There are therapists, family mediators. My son tried to steal my wife and my fortune, I said with a hard voice. There is no mediation possible for that. The following days were intense. We reviewed every property, every account, every investment that had Michael's name associated with it. The ranch where he kept Emily prisoner. I transferred it to the immigrant couple they had hired, along with enough funds so they could live with dignity for the rest of their lives. They had been victims too, the 2 commercial properties Michael managed. I transferred them to a trust for Emily, the shares of the family company I had promised him. I divided them between my daughter Jessica and several charities. The investment fund I had created for him. I dissolved it and donated the money to a shelter for victims of family violence. But I kept a final surprise. The house where Michael and Sarah lived, a mansion in Westlake Hills, that I had bought for them as a wedding gift, was still in my name. Legally, I could take it back whenever I wanted, and that was exactly what I did. The day Michael and Sarah got out on bail, they found the locks changed. They found a legal eviction notice. They found their belongings packed in boxes in the garden. Michael called me furious. You cannot do this. It is our house. It is my house, I corrected, that I lent you out of generosity. Generosity that ended the day you decided to kidnap your mother. I am going to sue you. Go ahead. My legal team is waiting. And while we are at it, let's talk about the criminal charges you are facing. Kidnapping, false imprisonment, attempted fraud abuse of a vulnerable person. The prosecutors are talking about 20 to 30 years in prison. Dad, please do not call me that, I said, repeating the words I had told him weeks ago. You are no longer my son. You are a criminal who is facing the consequences of his actions. But Michael would not give up so easily. A week later, he arrived at my house with Sarah. The security guards I hired, yes. I had guards now tried to stop them, but I shouted to let them pass. I wanted to see them. I wanted to look them in the eyes. They entered the living room where Emily and I were having tea. She tensed immediately upon seeing them, her hand squeezing mine tightly. Michael looked gaunt. Sarah had eyes swollen from crying. Good, let them suffer. Mom, Michael started with a trembling voice. I know that. Do not speak to her, I interrupted. You have no right to address her. I am her son. You are her jailer, I spat. You are the person who kept her drugged and prisoner for 6 months. You are nothing to her. Sarah knelt, crying. Mr. Anderson, please, we made a terrible mistake, but we were desperate. The debts, the pressure. What debts? Asked Emily, suddenly her voice firmer than in weeks. Sarah hesitated. Michael looked at her with warning, but she continued. Michael invested in a business with dangerous people. We lost everything they threatened us. They said, if we did not pay. So you decided to rob my family? I finished for her. You decided to destroy my wife to save your own necks. It was the only option, shouted Michael. You do not understand. They were going to kill us. We needed money fast, and your will. My will was my decision, I roared, standing up. If you were in trouble, if you needed help, you should have come to me. I am your father. It was my job to help you. You would not have given me enough, he muttered. And there it was, the final truth. It was not just money. It was greed. It was the belief that he had a right to me and my fortune, that he could take whatever he wanted without consequences. Get out, I said with a tired voice, and never come back. Dad, if you step on this property again, I will call the police. You have a restraining order. Use it before I put you back in jail. They finally left, defeated and broken, but something told me this was not over. And I was right. 3 days later, Jessica, my daughter, arrived from Dallas, where she lived with her family. I received her with joy. Jessica had always been the responsible daughter, the one who called me every week, the one who visited her mother religiously. But when she entered the house, the expression on her face froze me. "Dad," she said with a cold voice, "we need to talk about what you are doing to Michael." And that was when I realized the battle was just beginning. I looked at Jessica as if she were a stranger. My daughter, my little girl, the one who hugged me every time she came to visit. The one who told me, "Dad, I love you," before hanging up the phone. But the woman standing in front of me had her arms crossed and an expression I had never seen on her. Hard, accusing, distant. "What am I doing to Michael?" I repeated slowly, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Are you asking me what I am doing to him? Dad, you disinherited him. You took his house. You left him on the street with criminal charges that could ruin his life forever. He kidnapped your mother." I said every word coming out like a bullet. "He kept her drugged at the ranch for 6 months. He made her work as a servant. He mistreated her." "That is what you say," replied Jessica, looking at me skeptically. The world stopped. "What is that supposed to mean?" Michael told me his version. He says Mom had a psychotic episode, that the doctors recommended keeping her isolated, that you were too old to care for her properly, and that... And you believed him? I interrupted, feeling the fury rise in my throat. "You believed him instead of believing me? Instead of asking your own mother what happened?" Jessica hesitated for the first time. "Mom is confused. The doctors say it is her memory. Your mother is confused because your brother had her drugged with sedatives for half a year." I exploded. "There are medical reports. There are witness testimonies. There is forensic evidence. What more do you need, Jessica? A confession signed in blood." "You do not have to yell at me," she said, stepping back. "Yes, I have to yell at you," I roared, "because it seems like the only way for you to listen to me. Your brother almost killed your mother. Does that mean nothing to you?" "It means a lot," she replied with a trembling voice, but there was something else in her eyes, something calculating. "But Michael is my brother. He is family, and you are destroying him for a mistake." "A mistake." The words came out like poison. "You call 6 months of kidnapping and abuse a mistake." Jessica bit her lip, and then said something that destroyed me more than everything Michael had done. "Dad, if you had divided your inheritance equally from the beginning, none of this would have happened." I stood paralyzed. "What did you just say?" "We all know you always planned to leave more to Mom than to us. 50% for her. 50% to divide between Michael and me. That is not fair, Dad. We are your children. We worked all our lives in the family business. Michael helped you build the development in North Austin. I managed the properties for years before getting married. So this is about money?" I asked with disbelief. "You are blaming me for your brother kidnapping his own mother, because my will did not seem fair to him. I am not justifying what he did," said Jessica, but her voice lacked conviction. "I am just saying you also had a part in this, if you had been more generous." "Get out of my house," I said, with a flat voice. "Dad." Now Jessica looked at me with tears in her eyes, but they were not tears of regret. They were tears of frustration, of contained rage. "This is not going to stay like this," she said while walking toward the door. "Michael has lawyers. He is going to fight this, and I am going to support him." "Then you are also out of the will," I said, with deadly calm. "Congratulations, Jessica. You just chose money over your own mother." She stopped on the threshold, her body rigid. For a moment I thought she would turn around, that she would apologize, that she would recognize the madness of what she was saying. But she just left, slamming the door shut. I let myself fall onto the sofa, trembling. Emily appeared from the hallway where she had been listening to everything. She looked pale, fragile. We lost our daughter too, she whispered. I could not answer. I just hugged her while we both cried. The following days were a descent into hell. Michael and Jessica launched a social media campaign. They published statements saying I was an abusive father, that I had mistreated Emily for years, that she had run away from me, and that Michael was only trying to protect her. They uploaded old photos of family gatherings with manipulative captions. Happier days before our father showed his true face. They hired a publicist who managed to place their version of the story in various media outlets. Businessman falsely accuses son after losing wife to abuse. The online comments were brutal. People who did not know me called me a monster, abuser. They said I deserved to die alone. Robert advised me not to read anything, but it was impossible not to find out. Business clients started asking uncomfortable questions. Some contracts were canceled. The board of directors of a charity where I served asked me to take a break until things cleared up. And then Michael played his strongest card. He filed a civil lawsuit against me for defamation and loss of income. He alleged that my false accusations had destroyed his reputation and his job opportunities. He asked for $50 million in damages. Simultaneously, he filed a lawsuit to annul the change of will, arguing that I was not in my right mind when I did it. He presented evidence that I suffered from senile dementia. The evidence consisted of statements from friends of his saying I had forgotten conversations, that I repeated myself, that I was confused about dates and events. It was all lies, but it sounded convincing on paper. And as a final blow, he requested legal guardianship of Emily, arguing that she was not capable of making decisions and that I was manipulating her against her family. Robert entered my office with the legal documents and threw them on the desk with frustration. "It is brilliant," he admitted bitterly. "Damn brilliant. He is flipping the narrative completely. Now he is the victim. You are the villain, and Emily is the damsel in distress who needs to be rescued." "From you. Can he win?" I asked, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. "In civil court, it is difficult. We have solid evidence, but the process can take years. Years of legal battle, of expenses, of emotional wear." He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "And honestly, William, there is a risk. If they find a sympathetic judge, if his lawyer is skilled enough, if Emily has a bad day on the stand and gets confused, can they take my wife away from me?" I finished for him. "It is a possibility." That night I did not sleep. I sat on the terrace watching the lights of Austin stretch toward the hills. How had it come to this? How a family that was once united, that celebrated Christmases together and supported each other in difficult times, had degenerated into this cruel war. I thought about all the decisions I had made in my life, the properties I bought, the businesses I built, the money I saved. All that for what? So my own children would hate me, so they would fight over my corpse like vultures. "You cannot give up." I turned around. Emily was at the terrace door, wrapped in a robe. She looked stronger than in weeks. The doctors said her recovery was remarkable. "I do not know if I can keep fighting," I admitted. "Maybe we should retire, go somewhere where no one knows us to start over. And let them win," she said, approaching. She sat next to me, taking my hand. "Let them get away with it." "I am tired, Emily." "Me too," she replied. "I am tired of being afraid, tired of crying, tired of us feeling weak." Her eyes shone with a determination I had not seen in months. "But I am not going to let what they did to me be in vain. I am going to testify. I am going to stand in front of a judge and tell exactly what Michael did to me. The lawyers are going to attack you. They are going to say you are confused, that you are inventing things." "Let them try," she said fiercely. "I have scars. I have marks on my wrists. I have 6 months of my life stolen. That cannot be faked." I looked at her with admiration. This woman who had been broken was finding her strength again. "Are you sure?" I have never been more sure of anything in my life. The next morning I called Robert. "We are going to fight, against everything, against everyone, and we are going to win." "That is the spirit," he replied with approval. I have some ideas. Robert's strategy was aggressive and multifaceted. First, we hired a team of private investigators to examine Michael's finances. If he and Sarah were in debt to dangerous people, as they had insinuated, we needed names. We needed proof. Second, we got detailed statements from the immigrant couple who cared for Emily. Their testimonies were devastating. They described how Michael gave them specific instructions on medication doses, how Sarah checked that Emily was sufficiently docile, how both spoke openly about waiting for the old man to kick the bucket. Third, we hired the best forensic psychiatrist in the country to evaluate Emily. His tests showed that she was completely sane and that the effects of the medication were consistent with forced long-term administration. And fourth, most important, we found the doctor who supposedly had diagnosed Emily with a severe mental disorder, the doctor whose documents Michael showed the couple. It turned out that doctor did not exist. The papers were fake, the signatures forged, the stamps bought on the internet. When Robert presented this evidence in a preliminary hearing, Michael's lawyer's face went white. But Michael did not give up. Instead of backing down, he escalated. One night, around 2 a.m, the security guards woke me up. There was someone trying to enter the property. The cameras captured 3 men in ski masks trying to jump the fence. The police arrived in minutes. The men fled before being captured, but they left something behind. A gas can and rags. They were going to burn down my house, with us inside. The police investigation found text messages on an abandoned burner phone. The messages came from a number registered to Sarah. Now they faced additional charges, attempted arson, and conspiracy to commit murder. The news exploded in the media. The narrative changed dramatically. The same journalists who had published Michael's version now wrote articles about the son who tried to murder his parents. Social media turned. The comments that previously attacked me now defended Emily and me. They called Michael a monster. They asked for the maximum penalty. Jessica published a statement saying she had no knowledge of her brother's actions and condemned any type of violence. But she did not apologize to me. She did not come to visit us. She did not call. She simply distanced herself, trying to save her own reputation. The court hearing arrived 3 months after the attempted arson. The room was full. Press, curious onlookers, relatives from both sides, although Michael's side was noticeably smaller. Emily was going to testify. I saw her go up to the stand with her head high, dressed in a navy blue suit I had bought especially for the occasion. She looked elegant, dignified, strong. Michael's lawyer, an aggressive guy named Arnold Stevens, began his interrogation, trying to confuse her. "Mrs. Anderson, is it true that you suffered a nervous breakdown in March of this year?" "No," replied Emily with a firm voice. "Did you not have episodes of paranoia, of erratic behavior?" "No." "Is it not true that your husband found you talking to yourself, believing there were intruders in the house?" "That never happened." Stevens showed some papers. "I have here statements from neighbors who say—" "Those statements are false," Robert interrupted. "We already presented evidence that those neighbors are friends of the accused, who accepted to sign statements in exchange for money." The judge reviewed the documents and frowned. "Mr. Stevens, this is highly irregular." Stevens changed tactics. "Mrs. Anderson, is it true that during your stay at the ranch, you did not try to escape even once Emily looked down for the first time?" "I could not. I was drugged. I could not think clearly. And when I tried to resist, her voice broke. "They what, Mrs. Anderson?" "They threatened me. Sarah told me if I did not obey, they would hurt William. They told me he was sick with a heart condition, that any strong shot could kill him, that if I caused trouble." Tears ran down her cheeks now, that they would kill him and make it look like an accident. The room erupted in murmurs. The judge banged the gavel, asking for order. "And you believe them?" pressed Stevens, trying to sound skeptical. "They had just kidnapped me," shouted Emily, her composure finally breaking. "They had just drugged me and taken me to an unknown place. My own son had betrayed me. Why wouldn't I believe them?" The silence that followed was absolute. I looked at Michael. He was pale, with hands clenched on the table. Sarah cried silently next to him, but they were not tears of regret. They were tears of self-pity. Michael's lawyer tried to compose himself. "No more questions, Your Honor." Robert stood up for cross-examination, but before he could speak, Emily addressed the judge directly. "Your Honor, there is something else I need to say." The judge nodded. "Go ahead, Mrs. Anderson." Emily turned toward Michael, looking him directly in the eyes for the first time since the trial began. "Michael," she said with a trembling but firm voice, "I gave you life. I carried you in my womb for 9 months. I nursed you. I took care of you when you were sick. I comforted you when you cried. I defended you when the world was cruel to you." Michael could not hold her gaze. "I taught you to walk, to read, to be a good person." Her voice became stronger. "Or at least I tried, because clearly I failed at some point, because the son I raised would never have done what you did to me." "Mom," Michael tried to interrupt, but she raised her hand. "No, you have no right to call me that, not anymore." Tears flowed freely down her face now. "You locked me up like an animal. You drugged me. You mistreated me. You stole 6 months of my life. And worst of all, is that you did it for money. For money you did not even need yet. For pure greed." The room was in absolute silence. Even the journalists had stopped writing. "There is something I want you to understand," continued Emily. "I do not forgive you. I probably never will. But I am not going to hate you either, because hating you would be giving you more power than you already had over me." She straightened in the chair. "Simply put, you are no longer my son. You are a stranger I once knew." She turned to the judge. "That is all I had to say, Your Honor." The judge nodded solemnly. "Thank you, Mrs. Anderson. You may step down." Emily returned to her seat next to me. I took her hand, and she clung to me as if I were a lifeline. The rest of the trial was a formality. The evidence was overwhelming. The witnesses credible, the charges irrefutable. 3 weeks later, the verdict arrived. Michael was found guilty of kidnapping, false imprisonment, forced administration of controlled substances, abuse of a vulnerable person, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The sentence, 22 years in prison. Sarah received 18 years as an accomplice. The civil lawsuits were dismissed with prejudice, which meant they could not file them again. Emily's guardianship remained, of course, in my hands, and in a decision that surprised many, the judge ordered Michael and Sarah to pay full restitution, all of Emily's medical expenses, legal fees, and $5 million in punitive damages. Since they had no money, this meant any asset they eventually acquired would be automatically seized. They would be poor for the rest of their lives. When they read the sentence, Sarah collapsed, crying. Michael just closed his eyes, defeated. Jessica, who had attended the last session of the trial, left the room without saying a word. She did not look at us. She did not say goodbye. She simply disappeared. That night, Emily and I sat on the terrace, drinking coffee and watching the stars. "How do you feel?" I asked. "Empty," she replied, honestly, "but also liberated, like I can finally breathe after being underwater." "I understand. How do you feel?" I thought about the question. "Like I aged 20 years in 6 months, but also grateful that you are here, that we survived." "We haven't survived yet," she said softly. "This is going to haunt us for a long time." She was right. The scars, emotional and psychological, would not disappear soon. But at least we were together. At least we were alive. And at least we had won. Although the victory had a bitter taste. Because in the end, what had we really won? Legal justice, yes. But we had lost our children. We had lost our family. And that was something no court verdict could give back to us. 7 months after the verdict, life had found a strange rhythm. Emily continued therapy twice a week. The doctors said her progress was extraordinary. The nightmares had decreased. She no longer startled when she heard footsteps behind her. She had regained almost all her weight, and her hair had grown back strong. But there were things that would never be the same. She could not be in closed spaces without windows. The ranch, although it now legally belonged to the couple, was a place she would never return to, and every time she saw a young woman with dark hair like Sarah, she tensed involuntarily. I was not the same either. I had become more cautious, more suspicious. The security guards were now permanent. Cameras covered every corner of the property. And every time the phone rang with an unknown number, my heart raced. But we were alive, and we were together. One morning in April, exactly a year after Emily's disappearance, I received a letter. It was from Jessica. The envelope trembled in my hands as I opened it. Emily sat next to me on the sofa, her hand finding mine. The letter said, "Mom and Dad, I know I have no right to write to you after everything that happened. I know I disappointed you, that I chose the wrong side, that I was blind and selfish. I am not going to ask for forgiveness because I know I do not deserve it, but I need you to know something. I did not know. I did not know the full truth of what Michael had done until I heard Mom testify. Michael had convinced me it was all a misunderstanding, that you, Dad, were exaggerating out of pain and confusion. When I saw the real evidence, when I heard the details, when I saw the marks on Mom's wrists, I wanted to die of shame. I have spent these months in therapy trying to understand how I could be so stupid, how I could choose my brother over my own mother. The answer is horrible but simple. Greed, fear of losing my inheritance, fear of being left with nothing. Dad, when you changed the will to disinherit me too, my first thought was rage. But now I understand it was the right thing. It was what I deserved. I am not writing to ask for money. I am not writing so you forgive me. I just want you to know I am sorry that I am ashamed, and that if one day in the distant future you decided to give me the chance to meet the woman I have become after this, it would be the greatest gift of my life. I love you. I have always loved you, even when I did not show it. Your daughter who does not deserve that title, Jessica." Emily cried silently next to me. I had a lump in my throat the size of a mountain. "What do we do?" she whispered. "I do not know," I admitted. We spent days discussing it. Emily was more compassionate than me. She said Jessica had at least recognized her mistake, that at least she had shown genuine regret. I was more skeptical. How many times had I heard pretty words that meant nothing? How many empty promises had I received? But there was something in that letter, something in the brutal honesty of her words. I'm not writing to ask for money. I do not deserve that title. It was the kind of honesty that hurt, the kind that meant something. 2 weeks later, I wrote her a reply. "Jessica, your letter took us by surprise. Your mother and I have talked a lot about what to do. I am not going to lie to you. The damage you caused is deep. Your mother felt betrayed not only by your brother, but by you. The girl she raised, whom she loved unconditionally, abandoned her in her darkest moment. That is not easily forgotten. But your mother has a bigger heart than mine. She says we all deserve a second chance. That genuine regret deserves to be recognized. We are not going to welcome you with open arms. It is not going to be like before. But if you have really changed, if you really understand the magnitude of what happened, then maybe, just maybe, we can start over, slowly, carefully, with clear boundaries. Your mother suggests you come visit. One afternoon without expectations, just to talk. If you agree, call this number." "Dad," Jessica called that same night, crying so hard she could barely speak. We agreed on a visit for the following weekend. When the day arrived, I was more nervous than for the trial. Emily prepared coffee and sweetbread, the pastries Jessica had always liked as a child. The doorbell rang at 3 o'clock sharp. Jessica was at the door with a bouquet of gardenias, Emily's favorite flowers, and red eyes from crying. "Hello," she said with a small voice. "Hello," I replied. We stood there for an awkward moment. Then Emily appeared behind me and, to my surprise, opened her arms. Jessica collapsed into them, sobbing. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." "I know, honey," whispered Emily, stroking her hair. I know. The next few hours were difficult, but necessary. We sat in the living room, the same room where Jessica had confronted me months ago, and talked. Jessica explained how Michael had manipulated her, how he had planted doubts about my sanity, how he had used her own fear of being left without an inheritance to control her. I am not saying I did not have responsibility, she clarified quickly. I chose to believe him. I chose not to investigate further. I chose money over you. That was my decision. Why? Asked Emily gently. Why was the money so important? Jessica wiped her tears. Because I am weak, because my husband lost his job 2 years ago and we were in financial trouble. Because I have 3 kids in private schools and a mortgage we could not pay. And when Michael told me Dad was planning to leave us with nothing, I panicked. I never said that I interrupted. My will always included generous provisions for both. I know now, she said, looking directly at me. But in that moment, blinded by fear and desperation, I believed Michael. I believed his lies because it was easier than facing the truth. And what was the truth? I asked. That I had lived my whole life waiting for your money. That I had never learned to support myself. That I depended on a future inheritance instead of building my own life. Her voice broke. When you disinherited me, my first thought was not, I lost my parents. It was I lost my financial security. What kind of person thinks like that? The silence that followed was heavy. A scared person, said Emily finally. A human, imperfect person. That does not justify it, I said firmly. Being afraid does not justify abandoning your mother. You are right, nodded Jessica. It does not justify it, and I am not trying to justify it. I am just trying to explain how I got to that point. So you understand, it was not malice. It was cowardice. That distinction mattered. Michael had acted with calculated malice. Jessica had acted with selfish weakness. Both were wrong, but there was a difference. Have you visited your brother? I asked. Jessica shook her head vehemently. No, and I am not going to. I hired a lawyer to review all my correspondence with him during those months. I wanted to make sure I had not been an accomplice without knowing it. Luckily, we found nothing, but I cut all contact. He writes to me from prison. I do not read the letters. I burn them. And Sarah, the same. They are dead to me. She looked at Emily. Mom, I know this is going to sound horrible, but I need to ask you something. I need to hear it from your mouth. What? What exactly did they do to you? Michael gave me his version. The newspapers gave another, but I need to know the full truth. From you. No matter how painful it is. Emily looked toward me. I nodded. It was her decision. She took a deep breath and began to speak. She told Jessica about the night Michael arrived at her house with a bottle of wine. To toast to Dad, he had said. The wine was drugged. She woke up at the ranch tied to a bed, with Michael standing over her, saying, I am sorry, Mom, but I need your share of the inheritance. She told her about the weeks of drugs of confusion, of terror, of ignored pleas. She told her about Sarah, dragging her by the hair, about the threats to kill her husband if she did not obey, about being forced to clean the floor until her knees bled. She told her about the moments of lucidity where she understood what was happening but could do nothing to stop it, like being trapped in your own body screaming without sound coming out. By the time she finished, Jessica was pale as a ghost, trembling. My God, she whispered. My God. Now you understand why I cannot forgive them, I said with a hard voice. It was not a mistake. It was not a moment of weakness. It was systematic torture for 6 months. Jessica nodded, unable to speak. Do you still believe your father exaggerated? Asked Emily softly. No, managed to say Jessica. Never, never again. We stayed in silence for a long time. The clock on the wall marked the seconds. Outside, the birds sang, oblivious to the emotional devastation inside the house. I do not know if I can forgive you, I said finally, looking at my daughter. I do not know if we can ever have the relationship we had again. I do not expect us to, she replied. I just hope. I do not know what I hope. Maybe just the chance to show you I have changed. Even if it takes years, even if it is just a small part of what we were. I looked at Emily. She nodded almost imperceptibly. Okay, I said carefully. We can try. Slowly. But I need you to understand something. There is no going back. You cannot fail your mother again. You cannot choose money over family again. If you do even once more, it is over. Forever. I understand, said Jessica firmly. And I accept those terms. The following months were of gradual reconstruction. Jessica came to visit us every 2 weeks. At first they were short and awkward visits, forced conversations about the weather and generalities. But slowly, very slowly, we started to reconnect. She told us about her children, our grandchildren we had barely seen in the last year, about how her husband had finally found work, about how they had sold their big house and moved to something more modest, about how they were learning to live without depending on future inheritances. We told her about Emily's therapy, about the short trips we had started taking to create new memories, about Emily's project to write a book about her experience to help other victims of family violence. It was not perfect. There were tense moments, uncomfortable silences, painful memories that surfaced unexpectedly, but it was progress. And the day Jessica brought her children to meet their grandparents, 3 beautiful children with curious eyes and shy smiles, I felt something I had not felt in more than a year. Hope. Emily cried with joy when the youngest, a 5-year-old boy named Matt, asked if he could hug her. Of course, my love, she said, laughing through tears. Seeing her with her grandchildren laughing and playing as if the last 2 years had not existed reminded me why it had been worth fighting. Not for revenge, not for legal justice, but for moments like this, for the possibility of rebuilding something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. A year and a half after the verdict, I received an unexpected call. It was the warden of the prison where Michael was being held. Mr. Anderson, he said with a professional voice, your son requested that you be added to his visitation list. Of course, the decision is entirely yours. I stood frozen. Michael wants to see me. Yes, sir. He has been requesting it for months, but following your previous instructions, we did not contact you until now. However, he insists it is important. Did he say why? No, sir. Just that he needs to talk to you, that there is something he must tell you before it is too late. Too late. What did that mean? I hung up the phone, feeling an emptiness in my stomach. That night I talked to Emily about the call. What do you want to do? She asked. I do not know. Part of me wants to ignore him, let him rot in that prison without seeing me ever again. And the other part, I sighed. The other part needs to know what he wants to say, needs to hear if there is something, whatever it is, that can make sense of all this. Then go, she said softly. Not for him, for you to close that chapter completely. 3 days later, I drove 2 hours to the state prison. The building was gray and depressing, surrounded by barbed wire and guard towers. I went through security. They scanned me, searched me, led me to a visiting room with plastic tables bolted to the floor, and then Michael walked in. I almost did not recognize him. He had lost weight, a lot of weight. His hair, previously perfectly combed, was messy and prematurely gray. He had deep, dark circles and a new scar over his left eyebrow. Prison had aged him 20 years. He sat in front of me with careful movements as if his body hurt. We looked at each other in silence for several seconds. Thanks for coming, he said finally. His voice was different, softer, more broken. I did not answer. I just waited. I know I have no right to ask you for anything, he continued. I know what I did is unforgivable, but I needed to see you. I needed to tell you something face to face. Speak, I said with a flat voice. Michael took a deep breath. I'm sick, pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctors say I have 6 months, maybe a year if I respond well to treatment. The world stopped. My son, the man who had betrayed his family, who had tortured his mother, was dying. I waited to feel something. Satisfaction, poetic justice. Something. But I only felt empty. I'm sorry, I said automatically. and I was surprised to realize I meant it, at least partially. "Do not be sorry," he replied. "I deserve it. Everything that is happening to me, I deserve it. Is that why you wanted to see me? To tell me you are dying?" "No." He leaned forward, his eyes, so similar to mine, filled with tears. "I wanted to ask for forgiveness. Not because I expect you to forgive me, not because I think I deserve it, but because I need you to know I understand what I did." "Oh, really?" I said sarcastically. "You understand you tortured your mother, that you almost destroyed your father, that you broke a family for money?" "Yes," he said simply. "I understand, and I hate myself for it every second of every day." "Good," I said coldly. "You should hate yourself." "Dad," he began, but I raised my hand. "Do not call me that. You lost that right." His lips trembled. "You are right. I am sorry." The silence stretched between us. Around us other families visited each other. Crying children, crying wives, crying mothers. So much pain concentrated in one place. "Does Sarah know?" I asked finally. "Yes, She does not want to see me either. She says everything is my fault, that I convinced her to do something horrible." He wiped his eyes. "And she is right." "Did she participate voluntarily?" "Yes, but I pressured her. I planned everything. I am mainly responsible." At least he was honest about that. "Is there anything else you want to tell me?" I asked, preparing to leave. "Yes." His voice broke completely now. "I want you to know that Mom, your wife, the woman I tortured, was the best mother in the world. And I knew it. I always knew it. And yet I hurt her in the cruelest way possible." Tears ran freely down his face now. "I want you to know that you were a good father, the best. You gave me everything: love, education, opportunities. And I wasted it all for greed and stupidity." "Michael, please let me finish," he pleaded. "I need to say this. I need you to hear it." I nodded stiffly. "There is nothing in this universe that can undo what I did. There is no amount of regret that can erase the pain I caused. I am going to die knowing I was a monster, that I wasted the greatest gift anyone can receive, a family that loved me." He stood up slowly with painful movements. "Thanks for coming, for giving me the chance to say this. I do not expect to see you again. I do not expect forgiveness. I just hope you and Mom can be happy, that you can forget about me and move on." He looked at me one last time with eyes full of despair and regret. "I loved you, Dad. I know I did not show it. I know I destroyed everything. But I want you to know I loved you, and I deeply regret disappointing you." He turned around and began walking toward the door where the guard waited for him. "Michael," I called him. He stopped, turning slowly. "I loved you too," I said with a trembling voice. "The son you were, the boy I carried on my shoulders, that Michael I loved with all my heart." Tears ran down my face now too. "But that Michael died the day you decided to hurt your mother and the man standing in front of me. I do not know him." He nodded slowly, accepting the blow. "I know. Goodbye, Mr. Anderson." And he left, escorted back to his cell, where he would spend his last months of life. I drove back home on autopilot, tears clouding my vision. I had to stop 3 times on the way because I could not see the road. My son was dying, and I felt nothing but a dull and persistent pain. No satisfaction that he was being punished. No relief that he would soon disappear from our lives. Just pain. Pain for what could have been and never would be. When I arrived home, Emily was waiting for me. One look at my face told her everything she needed to know. She hugged me in silence, letting me cry against her shoulder. "He is dying," I managed to say finally. "Cancer." She tensed. "How long?" 6 months, maybe a year." She said nothing. She just held me while I processed the impossible mix of emotions. That night, lying in bed, Emily broke the silence. "Do you think his regret was real?" I thought about the question, about Michael's eyes, about his broken voice, about his shattered body. "Yes," I admitted finally. "I think it was real. But that does not change anything. Regret does not undo the damage. No, she agreed, but at least it means he died understanding what he did. That is something. It is enough. I do not know, I sighed. Could anything be enough? I had no answer for that. Michael died 8 months later. We did not attend the funeral. Jessica did go, but told us it was more to close her own cycle than to honor her brother. It was small, she told us later. Just Sarah, some distant cousins, and me. No one else. A wasted life, a squandered talent, a destroyed family, all for greed. But life went on. Emily published her book 2 years after the trial. It became an unexpected bestseller. Thousands of letters arrived from women and some men who had experienced similar betrayals by family members. We used the proceeds from the book to establish a foundation helping victims of family violence. We called it the Hope and Dignity Foundation. Jessica became the volunteer director, dedicating her time to helping others heal as she was healing. And Emily and I learned to live again. We traveled. We met our grandchildren. We planted a new garden at a different property, because the ranch was forever a place of pain. We learned that family is not just blood. It is choice. It is loyalty. It is love demonstrated through actions, not words. We lost 2 children, but recovered 1, and we gained 3 grandchildren who filled our lives with unexpected joy. Was it enough? Did it make up for the pain? No. Nothing could do that. But it was something. It was a new beginning. It was hope. And sometimes that is all we need to keep going. Today, 5 years after I opened that door at the ranch and found my wife scrubbing the floor, I sit on my favorite terrace. Emily is in the garden teaching our grandson Matt how to plant roses. He is 10 years old now and adores her. Jessica is inside preparing dinner, singing softly. The sun sets over the hills, painting the sky orange and purple. And I think about everything we lost, everything we gained, everything we learned. I learned that material wealth is fragile, that money can corrupt even the most loved ones, that greed is a poison that destroys from within. But I also learned that true love is stronger than betrayal, that dignity is maintained even in the darkest moments, that forgiveness, when deserved, can heal wounds that seem fatal. I learned that it is never too late to start over, to rebuild, to choose hope over bitterness. And I learned that true family is not the one born of blood, but the one forged in the fire of adversity and chooses to remain united. Emily approaches, taking off her gardening gloves, smiling. "What are you thinking about?" she asks, sitting next to me. "About how much we have survived," I reply, taking her hand. "About how much we have overcome together," she adds, squeezing my fingers. "Together," I repeat. And as the sun hides completely and the stars begin to appear, I feel something I had not felt in years. Peace. It is not a perfect peace. The scars are still there. The painful memories sometimes resurface without warning. But it is real peace. Earned, deserved, and it is enough. If this story touched your heart, if it touched something inside you, I ask you to share it. Because somewhere there is someone going through a similar betrayal. There is someone who needs to know survival is possible, that dignity can be recovered, that true love can heal even the deepest wounds. Leave a comment telling me which part of this story resonated most with you. Have you experienced family betrayal? Have you had to rebuild your life after a devastating loss? You are not alone. You are never alone. And remember, respect is earned, loyalty is demonstrated, and true family is the one that chooses to stay when everything falls apart. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for allowing me to share my pain and my healing. May you never have to open a door and find your world shattered on the other side. But if you do, may you find the strength to rebuild as we did. Until the next story, take care. Take care of yours, and never, never take true love for granted.